Us today. So as you heard in that introduction, we are with a Scandinavian disruptor and brand management executive who has transformed the culture and bottom line at some of the biggest and most iconic companies and events. So what we're going to talk about today is how you bring emotion and relevance back into some of these firms and companies. So Lars, let's get started with asking you about your leadership style. You worked at many big corporations, and anyone in change management or trying to disrupt how things are done knows that you can sometimes come up against a wall of very entrenched thinking, behaviors, culture. So what's your approach whenever you go into a company tasked with turning things around?
I think first and foremost, you need to realize that you need to stop a lot of things. You're not going to be the most popular person in the room, because in big companies, you're coming into a company where like the previous success of the company has been built by the people that are there. And you coming in having to change things, of course you're going to challenge a lot of people and a lot of power positions, but you need to know that before you're going into that job. You also need to know that you're probably not going to be there forever, because if you want to drive change, you're going to step on some toes, you're going to push people around a bit, and at some point it might be time for you to leave when you think that you've done enough change. So I think the first thing you do is basically try to stop as much as possible. Try to really take anything that's not necessary and stop that. Get the people that are doing things that are not necessary, get them out of there. It might be quite brutal, but you need to do that in the beginning when you have the mandate and you have the chance to change things. And then you start building the change on the brand and the brand DNA.
Interesting. And of course, you have to build a top team around you, and you're very hands-on. So you've hired people from London to Shanghai to Singapore. What do you look for in candidates when you want to bring them in to help you turn things around at these big corporates, at things like the Olympics? I
think both in startups, but also in changing big corporations, when it comes to having a startup mentality in a corporation, you need to have a very flat structure. And that's why I've been very focused on having very hands-on management and people management. And you might have like a ton of direct reports, but you need to have that hands-on experience. If you have a deep layer of middle management, you don't get the same ability to really move things quickly and be hands-on with people. So that's why I always decide to hire people and be very hands-on on hiring people with the right culture. And I would say I actually hire more based on culture than on competencies. With competencies you can build. Of course, there needs to be some level of competency there, but rather have the right cultures, team mentality, interest in learning, and interest in changing. That's more important than actually having the exact specific special competencies.
You've spoken about the importance of having a diverse team as well, but what would you do if you had, let's say, a rock star individual who's really brilliant but doesn't necessarily gel with the team that you're trying to build within that culture? How do you kind of balance that? Because again, we see so many executives who have their own type of way of working these days.
I think in having worked in US entertainment at MTV and also different other places where you need to have like literally rock stars presence.
Yeah.
There's a special way of handling those egos, but it can be at a level where you have to cut them out because they're destroying the whole mentality. And I think there's a difference between building a team around entertainment stars and talent, and then having the same kind of ego in a team that has to do day-to-day work. And I think that's where you need to make sure that you have rock stars at the right level, at the right time, but not in the day-to-day operation.
All right, I want to work backwards through your very impressive career. So you started out at the Danish Broadcasting Corporation as the head of social media and digital innovation. So what you did there was that you took a traditional media outlet and you propelled it into the digital era. That's something that we are doing ourselves at BBC News. Then you moved to Lego and was there for around 8 years. Now that's a company that was founded in 1932. When you started out there, bringing those skills again from the Danish broadcaster, what was the social media presence like? What was the digital footprint like at Lego? And what was it like by the time you left?
When I joined, there was nothing. Lego was it still is a very risk-averse company. It's not as creative on the inside as it seems on the outside. It's a very number-driven, profit-driven company, very professional-driven company. I have a huge respect for that company. I learned a lot at Lego. But they were very risk-averse, so they had no social media footprint. They had
Zero.
no YouTube. Zero, absolutely zero. Then we built a team, or I built a team around 80, 100 people, and then we ended up top of the ranks on YouTube and social media when I left. And for a company like Lego, it takes 5 years to really put that change in place, because it's not like it's not a company that has failed. At that point, it was quite a successful company. It became even more successful. But to change a successful company is actually a bit tougher, I think, than changing a failing company, because you don't have a burning platform to build on. You actually have a lot of success you need to deal with.
We'll get to Nokia in a second, but that's really, really interesting to hear that. I would have imagined that was playtime all the time inside Lego. I was surprised to hear it's a conservative culture. Okay, then you moved to New York and you joined Viacom's newly created MTV Digital Studios, working on some of their brands, including Cribs, which I used to love watching. I'm a millennial. Total Request Live, short form known as TRL. But these properties weren't making money, were they? And you had to take action to turn the numbers around. How did you achieve that?
It's the whole entertainment industry, as you know, and broadcasting is caught in this dilemma between old TV production cost, very, very high production cost, and then a new digital reality where you can make money, you can actually make profit, but you need to have a completely different operation and a completely different output. And it's not about increasing it 15 or 20%, it's like 1,000%. You need to increase the output or minimize the cost. And the same thing we did, and I've done a few times in other companies, the same thing we did at MTV, really stopping everything that was not viable, that was not financially viable, and then kind of shock therapy your way into basically saying, whatever we're using on catering for a shoot, that's now the entire production budget. Because then when you put outrageous constraints on people, not saying that they have to cut 10% or 15%, but say they have to cut 90%, then they start thinking differently, then they start being creative, and then they start really thinking about how to do things in a completely different way. So you need to give outrageous challenges if you really want to drive massive amount of change.
That's interesting, but again, this is a very well-known American company. I would imagine that it's quite different whenever you have to work in markets where there may be stronger unions, for example. So affecting change may be tougher in different markets. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, definitely. There are some markets, Germany is one of them, where it's very difficult to drive change, and I think a lot of companies are avoiding Germany for that reason, because it's very difficult to get rid of people, it's very difficult to hire people, and that's why some markets are being avoided. And it might be, that's just the brutal reality of things.
All right, now let's move on to an event that everyone knows about. You don't get bigger in the world of sport than the Olympics, and of course we have Paris 2024 coming up. And you famously worked on the Tokyo Summer Games in 21 and the Beijing Winter Games in 2022. These events often get very politicized. So, how do you navigate sensitivities and geopolitical issues, especially in this day and age where everything is scrutinized online?
You spend a lot of time with your PR team, and you spend a lot of time with your corporate communication team. And I would say doing especially Beijing Olympics, of course, was during the pandemic was a hot potato, and not the dream. If you want to do creative marketing and just be free to do whatever you want, that's not the right context. But I also found the challenge quite interesting, because you're not working in corporate politics, you're working with geopolitics. Like you're working with proxies of a government who has nuclear weapons. It's a different conversation in that room when the Chinese president wants something. Of course, you need to respect that, because you're invited to do an event in a country, and you can't just have your opinion about things without having respect for the hosting country and city. So it's a very, and working in sports politics at that level, it's very, very interesting. It goes very, very slow, and you need to have a lot of cultural insight and respect for all people, because the Olympic movement is a universal movement. Everyone needs to be part of it. except Russians at the moment, but pretty much everyone besides that. And that was what I found really interesting about the job. It's not a fast-moving organization, but it's making progress.
To be a fly on the wall in some of those meetings that you've had to have with those nuclear powers and their proxies. Okay, so we've established that you're a turnaround artist at major corporates. Now you're currently at HMD Global and Nokia Phones as their chief marketing officer, and you're trying to make their devices cool again and attract a new generation of consumers. Now Nokia, of course, was once the world's biggest phone company and collapsed by 2013. It's one of the most notorious corporate failures, and now they're trying to come back again. Quick question to the audience. For who used to own a Nokia phone? Well, there we go. You've seen that raise of hands. What are you planning to do there? Share some of the secrets.
Yeah, so HMD Global is a 6-year-old startup. Our investors are Google, Foxconn, Qualcomm, so strategic investors. Google deliver clean Android, Foxconn delivers like the production capabilities, and Qualcomm deliver the chipsets. Then we're producing Nokia phones. We're the maker of Nokia phones, but we're also makers of a number of different other phone brands. I think we're still selling around 60 million phones a quarter, so it's not like we're not there, and we're growing. What we've experienced in the last year is a very like a surge in the interest for dumb phones or feature phones.
Hold on a second. We have to explain what a dumb phone is because I didn't get it.
Yeah. So you have a smartphone, and a dumb phone is typically what a Nokia was, like 3210 or 3310. That's a dumb phone.
I had a 3310.
And we can see that there's been digital fatigue, and especially coming from Gen Zs, we see that they're really like putting down the phone. And I think instead of considering like the smartphone as an assistant, it's becoming more and more a dictator of your life. And you see people doom scrolling, you see people spending average 4.5 hours a day on the phones. And one of the most scary statistics that I saw was that if you have kids, by the age of 12, you would have spent 75% of your time with your kids that you ever get to spend with them. You would have spent that at the age of 12. At the age of 18, you would have spent 90% of your time with your kids. If that's not a stat that makes you put down the phone and avoid being on TikTok or Instagram or LinkedIn while you're with your kids or while the kids are with your parents, I don't know what needs to be like kind of a reality check on this one. And that's why we see a surge in the adoption of dumb phones. And we're also trying to really innovate in a way that people can digital detox, people can really like use phones in a different way. So we both do smartphones, we also do dumb phones, but we're really trying to innovate phones that are meant for people, not meant for tech giants to really keep churning new devices around once a year and keep like making people stick to the phone constantly.
Wow, first of all, I'm still a bit stunned by that statistic you threw out about screen time among children and up until their teenage years. And so in terms of the price point, are you also adjusting the price point for a new generation of consumers? We have seen other big phone companies come out, whether it's Samsung or Apple again. These are seen as desirable items. And so how are you approaching that?
So HMD stands for Human Mobile Devices. We want to make it affordable for everyone to have a phone. So for instance, we're selling through microfinancing in Africa. You can basically acquire a phone for $20. Then you do a micropayment every week to make sure that you pay the full amount. But that's like phones for around like $80. You can do and you can deliver like great products at that price. Of course, an iPhone is for $2,000 is better. It has more like better processors, better chipsets, and so on. But in my opinion, we don't need a new phone every year. We don't need a new washing machine every year. Like imagine if that was your washing machine that every year would get a bit slower, wouldn't like dry the clothes the same way, and wouldn't clean the clothes in the same way, and you'd have to buy a new one. No one would accept that. But for some reason, we accept that when it comes to phone, and that's why we have 5.4 billion devices lying in drawers all over the world. And that's becoming e-waste, that's going into the drinking water, that's ending up in landfills and so on. And that's a massive problem that we're trying to address.
Interesting. So a real focus on sustainability and also tapping emerging growth markets, such as on the African continent. Well, we've run out of time, but if you want to hear more about the exciting plans that Lars has, then please join him on the main stage at 3:20 p.m. I'm getting that time right.
I hope so, yeah.
Round of applause for our guest, Lars.
Thank you.